Yellowstone National Park is beautiful, but it's more dangerous than you could possibly imagine. Whatever you think is bad, I promise you it's worse. And if you get to the end of this video, I promise your entire perspective will change. But I'll be quick. If you're ready to suspend your disbelief and become fully immersed in today's adventure, you found your new favorite channel. We post once a week, but there's plenty on the channel to binge. So if you're ready, like the video for good luck because you're gonna need it. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our uploads. Enjoy the show. So in the summer of 2022, there was a couple national parks that I wanted to hit before another brutal Chicago winter. My entire life, I've made the best out of our summers because of how excruciating the winters are here. So by the time the warm weather comes around, I'm vibrating with excitement and energy, and I could barely keep myself inside for the following months. For those of you wondering why I wouldn't just travel to warmer places during the winter since I hate it so much, the simple answer is because I was broke and I would just spend all winter saving money until the sun came out. But that doesn't really matter. What matters is my friend Hamza and I locked in a trip to Yellowstone National Park right at the beginning of the summer. We weren't planning anything crazy. We weren't planning on doing any deep hikes or major excursions. We just wanted to go to see the beauty of it. We were just looking to see the geysers, Yellowstone Lake, and maybe that river that flows into that really beautiful canyon. Maybe pet a bison or two if they'd have us. But my point is that we were there just for a leisure trip. We were just looking for a simple weekend of gawking at the natural beauty of Yellowstone National Park before driving north to Montana, which, let me tell you, is a story for another time. So we booked a room at the Old Faithful Inn a couple months ahead of time because of how hard it is to get a reservation there. Not to mention how hard it is to get one during wedding season. We managed to book one of the older rooms that is still there from the original build of the entire inn. The inn has newer, more modern rooms now, but we thought it would be sweet to book one of the rooms that was built in 1904. The only downside to those rooms that were built in 1904 was that they had no bathroom attached to your room. But I guess that's part of the fun when you're staying in this massive log cabin that was built over 100 years ago. And when I say the Old Faithful Inn is a straight up log cabin, I mean it. I'd never seen anything like this place. I've stayed in a log cabin in the Smoky Mountains before, and I thought that that was an impressive build. But that thing was nothing compared to the Old Faithful Inn. That place was enormous, and it really was only logs. And I know that sounds stupid to be amazed that a log cabin is only built with logs, but I didn't even know architecture was possible like this, especially back in 1904. This place looked like it was built with massive Lincoln logs. Do you remember those things? The sheer size of this place just gave it this aura of significance. It felt like the time it was built, it must have made such a massive impact on tourism in the area. It must have made Yellowstone the destination place that it is today. The architecture here was just insane. It felt like walking into history. So you could imagine when we pulled up and walked inside, we were super excited. Not to mention the energy inside this place was the energy of a wedding. There was clearly a massive wedding occurring this weekend, where both the bride and groom either had massive families or they were just both mad popular. The second you walked into this place, it felt like an absolute party, which Hamza and I loved. There's nothing better than being in a location where there's a fun event happening that weekend, because everybody you interact with is carrying the enthusiasm of the event with them. The fun is infectious and it's such a trip enhancer. But one thing about being in a place like that for an event like that is that you might get overlooked by staff, and this can result in not getting the help you need when you need it. And this isn't anything negative about a large event getting all of the attention from the staff. They need it. When there's an event that big, I feel for the staff. I've done customer service, and their attention is where it should be, towards this massive event. But this is a pro tip if you find yourself in a situation like this on a trip. Find one staff member that has a little bit of pull there and just start tipping them generously while being very friendly. And whenever you need something while you're there, just keep going to them and tipping them very generously. This way you have one seasoned worker that's invested in you and your stay without taking the majority of the attention away from the event where it should be, but you still get the help that you need. And it's also a great way to give a worker a great weekend, which would most likely be a stressful time for them under any other circumstance. So right when we walk in, we walk straight up to the front desk and we start hitting it off with the man that's standing right behind it. This guy had been working here every summer for about 5 years, and he doubled as a tour guide. So he had worked multiple positions in this establishment. He was also an all-around great dude who was super passionate about his job and super accommodating. Some would say he was the perfect target for random acts of kindness. So we chatted with him for a minute, and then we exchanged my credit card for our room keys. So before we walked away, we thanked him for his help, and then I slipped him a little $40. Naturally, he was like, "Why are you giving me $40?" And I just replied, for always helping us out. Some would say he's the perfect target for random acts of kindness. So we chatted with him for about a minute and then we exchanged my credit card for room keys. But before we walked away, we thanked him for his help and slipped him a little $40. Naturally, he asked us why we gave it to him, and we just simply replied, for always helping us out, dude. And we were just laughing and walking away because we knew what we were doing. I picked this tip up from when I was a busboy and I would work like large parties. Some random guy did this to me for a whole busy weekend. He just kept slipping me $20 for every little thing that I would do for him. Just little things that I was doing for everybody else for free. Plus, this guy talked to me like I was a real person and he included me in a bunch of conversations. And he would ask my opinions on things as I would walk by. And I never forgot how that made me feel. He was just being nice and generous with me and thanking me for giving him and his friends a good time. He was just being so generous. And it's weird because it really just made me want to go over the top for this guy and his friends. And not just because of the money, it was because he didn't treat me like a servant. It's almost as if being properly compensated for your work makes you take more pride in it. Employers should take notes. And I've never forgotten that weekend. I never forgot how much fun I had working it, and I never forgot that guy. So I try to replicate that everywhere I go with some local kid so he continues the tradition that I learned from that guy. And I could see on this guide's face that we did just that, and he was definitely going to be our go-to guy for this weekend. So just like that, first mission is complete and we head to our room to settle in. We just dropped our stuff off, changed our clothes, and then we went poking around, just checking out the local views and just looking at the local wildlife. We didn't really have anything eventful planned for the first day, so we just wandered around a little bit. But then we got hungry. So we grabbed a bite nearby and we brought it over to eat it in the lobby of the Old Faithful Inn. It was really loud and busy in the lobby and it just felt like everybody around us knew each other. We would have had to borderline shout at each other to manage to have a conversation in that room. But neither of us wanted to match our surroundings' volumes, so we just ate our food and people watched. We weren't trying to listen in on people's conversations, but one dude nearby was telling a story just so loud that we couldn't help but listen in. It was impossible to ignore this dude. He was so outgoing and loud. And this guy was just talking to a group of probably his friends and family, and he was just pointing up at the crow's nest that was at the ceiling on top of the lobby. So apparently the inn used to have people play live music in this elevated room at the top of the lobby. And there's also a view of the Old Faithful geyser from that room from a really nice vantage point. And this guy went on to mention that you can no longer go up there because of a recent earthquake. And then he gave one more reason, but we couldn't hear. We couldn't hear it because a group behind us bursted out into laughter as this guy was finishing his story. It must have been something gross though because of the expressions on his little audience's face. But whatever it was that he said wasn't going to change what was on me and Hamza's mind. See, Hamza and I have a bit of a mischievous streak when we're together. And listen, don't give me a hard time about it. Everybody has that one friend that they bond with by doing stuff together that they're not supposed to do. If it's sneaking into music festivals, to cutting fifth period to go get some Chipotle together, to going up to the crow's nest tonight to check out that view, we all have a little piece of that in us. It's just that little feeling of, can I get away with it? And after years of our mischief giving us top tier memories, we just look at each other and we're like, game on. So we had our objective for the weekend, a much smaller objective than they used to be. Considering the old ones were to jump a 10-foot fence at Lollapalooza, juke out 4 security guards, dodge tasers, and then meet each other 2 hours later at stage 4 to watch Post Malone. This one was a side quest compared to Lollapalooza, but it would scratch that itch for us. So we finished up our food, puttered around for a little bit until it was time to head up to the crow's nest. We waited in our room till about 10 p.m.-ish. The hotel felt as if most of the wedding goers were settling back into their rooms after the rehearsal dinner or whatever events that they had planned that evening. It wasn't so late that there was no movement around the hotel, but it was dark and the stragglers were just slowly straggling in. And see, this is the perfect time to do something like this at a hotel because it's dark out. Most of the employees' shifts are close to over, so everybody's a little bit relieved. But it isn't so late that the hotel is completely silent and all of the employees are doing their end of shift protocols. It's this beautiful grace period where you could get away with just about anything, and that's what we were planning on doing. We were just planning on getting up there, enjoying the view, having a laugh, and getting out of there lickety-split like nothing happened. And we knew that no employee would question where we were going because our section of the hotel didn't have private bathrooms. There's a shared bathroom down the hall from our room that's conveniently in the same direction as the crow's nest. So we were just walking down the hallways saying what's up to some of the room service employees headed for the base of those stairs that headed to the crow's nest. We knew we had to go to the main lobby because that was the only place that had access to the stairs to the crow's nest. And luckily there wasn't much foot traffic near the stairs. And the view from the front desk to the base of the stairs isn't ideal for surveillance. The coast was pretty clear, so we just kind of decided to go for it. Let me tell you, the keep out sign and the little gate in front of the stairs weren't much of a deterrent for an adult. They're rather unimpressive. The little gate might keep out kids and toddlers and maybe small dogs, but it wasn't keeping us out. We just stepped over that thing like the Undertaker used to do over the top rope to enter the ring, and then we we just got up the first flight of stairs. See, the stairs to the top don't give you good coverage. If anybody from the front desk looked at the stairs leading up to the crow's nest, they would see us if we were standing up straight and just walking. So we had to stay on the far end of the stairs and walk up on all fours to minimize visibility. And after the third flight of stairs, I realized just how high up this crow's nest is. We were only about halfway up and I was getting a little bit fatigued bear crawling up these stairs. But it didn't bother me that much because it was just a part of the fun. If there wasn't something hard about what we were doing, the payoff wouldn't be worth it. It wouldn't scratch that itch that we needed itched. So we just stay on course on all fours, just going left foot and right hand, right foot and left hand, and we just stay on course till the top. There was a small area where you could stand up right before the entrance to the crow's nest, but again, it would be completely visible from the ground level, so we had to continue crawling. The only place up there that had a good amount of coverage was the crow's nest itself. It had all sorts of wooden designs that gave you partial coverage, almost as if they were quarter walls all the way around, so you could stand up there and probably be fine. So we had to crawl all the way to the door of the crow's nests from the top of these stairs. This was the final stretch, and I was starting to get excited to reach our final destination. So I'm just crawling, Hamza's right behind me, and I start to get excited that I'm about to enter the crow's nest and I'm going to be able to stand up finally. I'm just excited to be able to stand up and get all the weight off of my arms and shoulders, but my payoff was a little bit different than I was expecting. I was expecting a nice empty room, but the reality is that we got caught. I was bear crawling, so I was basically looking at the floor. I was only able to see about a foot in front of me, and right before I was about to stand up, I'm looking at a pair of shoes with a pair of feet in them. There was somebody in this room, and I just crawled in like an absolute moron. This right here is about to be the most embarrassing moment of my life. I'm about to have to stand up and look this woman in the eyes and try to explain why myself and my grown friend just crawled into a restricted area. I knew it was a woman because I'm face to face with her toes, and she was wearing heels and she had a little opening at the front of her heels with her toes sticking out the front, and her little toes were painted. This was about to be a humiliating one, and hopefully we didn't get kicked out of the hotel for it. I literally just stopped soon enough to not headbutt her shin, and I had to stop so abruptly that Hamza headbutted my ass and I almost bumped into her. I was off balance, embarrassed, and about to start apologizing for trespassing. I just took my sweet time getting from all fours to my feet, and I'm just dreading this initial eye contact with whoever this woman is. And I was planning on just fessing up right away and begging for forgiveness. We were clearly being sneaky and crawling, so there was no point in playing stupid. If we didn't know we weren't supposed to be here, we wouldn't have been sneaking around. And as much as I wasn't ready for it, the time came where I had to look this person in the face. And it was time to take accountability for my incredibly immature actions. But at that moment, I realized that there was actually no reason to be worried. This woman definitely did not work here. We just walked in, well, I guess crawled in, on the bride of the wedding, hiding in the crow's nest. I only assumed she was the bride by what she was wearing, her attire. It didn't look like a wedding dress exactly, more like a wedding uniform. It was somewhere in between a wedding dress and a nun's outfit. Since her arms were completely covered, the gown went all the way up to her neck. It wasn't your typical wedding dress. It reminded me of the one that Elizabeth Swann wore in Pirates of the Caribbean. She looked like she was about to get married off to another royal family by her dad's wishes to unite two kingdoms. But she didn't look like she was being sent off to Prince Charming. She looked like she was getting sent to Prince Joffrey for a lifetime of torture and abuse. At least that's what the look on her face told me. This woman had clearly been sobbing her eyes out for a while now. Her face was almost swollen and blue with pressure. Even with our presence in the room and crawling in like little weirdos, she couldn't even keep herself together. She wasn't wailing or yelling or screaming. If anything, she was trying to hide her sobbing. And she had both of her hands covering her mouth, trying to muffle her crying. She must have come up here for some alone time to get away from everybody, thinking that nobody would be immature enough to sneak up here with her. Little did she know, me and old ham guy wanted to see some geysers this weekend, and another awkward situation just seemed to find me wherever I go. She took a step back. She seemed a little bit scared of us initially, obviously because of the way we entered the room. It's super dark out and we just crawled in like we're a poltergeist or something. But I could tell she was immediately relieved because of our instinct to stand up, put our hands up, and start immediately apologizing. But even though she wasn't scared of us, she was still hysterical. I mean, I could only imagine the pressure of a wedding of this magnitude. At least that's what I initially thought, but then I took a better look at her. This didn't seem like the pressure of a moment crying. This seemed like she was having a real tragic cry. She looked like a woman that was desperate for help, or she just witnessed something absolutely traumatizing. We were trying to balance giving her the space that she needed while offering our help if she needed. So I just started off by asking her very simply, are you okay? Do you need anything? Can we help you with anything? And Hamza followed up, obviously trying to make her feel comfortable. Hey, if you just want some alone time, just give us the word, we're out of here. But this woman just seemed stuck in a loop of hysteria. She just couldn't even get a word out. It seemed as if she was trying, but she couldn't even get a breath into her lungs. Or she was just trying to like swallow some saliva before talking. She looked like she was choking on something damn near. I could see her just battling a knot in her throat, but it did seem like she was planning on saying something, so we waited patiently. And at this point, her eyes are just shooting around and she's just looking behind us and over the edge of the crow's nest. It looked as if she was trying to see if anybody else was approaching. Her hysteria was blending with embarrassment. I felt really bad for this girl. You could see that she didn't want anybody to see her like this. She was clearly up here hiding to get away from everybody or something. So I just gently repeated my question because she didn't ask us to leave, because I just wanted to make sure that she was okay before we left her up here. So I just said very simply, "Are you okay?" And she just shot her eyes back at us, and I could see that she fully acknowledged our question that time. And she definitely had the intention of answering it, but it didn't seem like she was capable of speaking, so she just started shaking her head side to side. So she's signaling to us that she is in fact not okay. She was shaking her head, staring at us as if she just experienced some real horrific trauma. I didn't want to pry too much, but I needed a little bit more info, so I'm like, "Can you tell us what happened? Like, give me something here." So then she started nodding yes after I pried a little bit, and then she started opening her mouth. And her voice started at an absolute whisper, and we couldn't even make out what she was saying. But after a couple tries from her, like she was really trying to give us some information, eventually some legible words came out. And she just said 3 things just like this. "Everybody thinks it's him. He ran. My husband would never." Immediately, my heart broke for this poor young woman. Her groom must have got cold feet and left the premises the day before their wedding. And she's having a breakdown and a panic attack about how somebody could lead her on all the way to the day right before the wedding just to bail and leave her embarrassed in front of her entire friends and family. So I look at Hamza and I could tell that he came to the same conclusion that I did. And there isn't much that you could do in that situation other than throw her a couple "I'm sorries." And just as I'm about to ask her if she wants some alone time, she just walks straight towards us as if she's about to leave. And if we didn't move out of the way, this lady would have walked straight through us. And when she was out the door of the crow's nest, she said one more thing in between the door and the flight of stairs. She just asked us in an almost pleading voice, "Please come with me." But she just said it out loud. She didn't even look back at us. She didn't even repeat herself or wait for us at all. She just said, "Please come with me," but kept it pushing. She just continued down the stairs and we just let her go. There was something about the way that she did it that didn't make us feel inclined to follow her. Like, I didn't even see her face when she said it, and she didn't ask twice, she didn't look back at us. It didn't really seem like she actually wanted us to follow her. She just went straight down the stairs without even a moment's hesitation. But once she was gone and we didn't immediately follow, it felt a little bit weird to try to catch up with her. Like, she was gone, she didn't wait, she didn't call back, so we were like, okay, well, she left, so we don't really want to follow her now. We waited about a minute, kind of maybe waiting for her to come back before we asked each other, should we go follow her? But at that point, it just seemed pointless. We were probably the only people at this entire hotel that didn't know the bride and the groom. And there was still plenty of people from the wedding party wandering around the hotel. And we just felt it was probably much better off for her to bump into the people that she knows with something this serious. So we just stayed up there. And we just talked about how sad she looked and how bad we felt for her. But then we just went back to what we were doing. We just wanted to look out of the window, enjoy the crow's nest for a little bit before sneaking back downstairs and heading back to our room. We were just circling the room and admiring the design and the craftsmanship that it must have taken to make this. But eventually we got bored of it and we headed to the window that faced the geyser field. And as we walked up to it to go look out of it, a heavy breeze came rolling in. It was so strong that it actually blew our hair back slightly. And not only was it a powerful gust, but it was also pungent. We got smacked with something that I could only compare to like a mix of ammonia and alcohol with a hint of hand sanitizer. It wasn't the smell of sulfur and rotten eggs from the geysers or the manure that was outside. It was completely different. It smelled like harsh chemicals and it stung my nostrils and throat. And along with this razor sharp breeze came some music that felt like it was in the wind. It sounded like there was live music being played at one of the other hotels in the area. And the trumpets and horns and harps got barely carried by this gust of wind. It was very faint, but it was noticeable for sure. It sounded like a gentle symphony that passed as quickly as it came along with the smell. And we're poking our heads out of the window trying to find the source of the smell and the sound, when Hamza hits my shoulder with the tops of his fingers to get my attention. And in a soft tone, still trying to conceal our cover, Hamza just goes, "Bro, where's she going?" So I look towards him and I see that he's looking down at the ground below us. And I see what he's talking about right away. That poor woman made her way down the stairs and out the front of the hotel. And she was just marching straight towards the Old Faithful geyser. I had already felt so bad for her, but now I was genuinely concerned for her. This woman was walking with a purpose away from the hotel. And we were just standing there watching watching her for a couple seconds, hoping that she's gonna stop. We're hoping that she's gonna stop and sit at one of the viewer benches or walk around the boardwalk around the geysers, but she did not stop. This woman just kept going, and my initial pity for her changed to extreme concern. I know she's going through it and she doesn't want to be around anybody, but this is still Yellowstone National Park. You can't just go walking around at night around here. This area is riddled with wildlife. We saw like 15 massive bison just driving in here, not to mention the bears, wolves, mountain lions, and moose. Yellowstone is not a joke, even when you're still in a more touristy area. My mind is freaking out at the thought of this hysterical woman just wandering the area. And I'm just thinking she's gonna run into a large predator and this situation's about to just get so much worse. And like I said, she was just walking directly towards the Old Faithful geyser. I assumed that she was just gonna walk along the boardwalks that they have built in there, but she just walked straight over it and right into the restricted area of the geyser field. And at that moment, panic really set in because we knew for sure that this woman isn't concerned with her own well-being tonight. The geyser fields are incredibly hazardous and the floor beneath her could give out at any second. There's no telling what dirt is sturdy ground and what dirt is just a thin layer of minerals that is about to break and you're about to fall in and become goop soup in boiling hot acid water. This woman might as well have been walking through a minefield with the way she was playing with death. So me and Hamza had a choice that we needed to make. Either both of us run down to the front desk to get help, or one of us stays to keep an eye on her from up here. Very quickly we decide that both of us should go down because it's only going to take us like 2 minutes to get down there. And we knew what general direction she was going. There was no point in one of us staying up here to just eventually watch her plunge into her death. We're both much better off being out there trying to get her off the geyser field. And to be honest, we did not care about being sneaky anymore. We did not care if we got caught sneaking into the crow's nest. It did not matter at this point. This woman was in legitimate danger and our little mischievous streak was the last of our concerns. Literally, who cares if we get kicked out of the hotel or get a ticket for trespassing as long as this woman gets home safe. So we're sprinting down this restricted staircase and we're looking towards the front desk and we see who's waiting for us. We wanted to get their attention as soon as possible, and I could see from a distance that our go-to guy was standing waiting for us at the desk. It was the guide that we generously tipped earlier, and hopefully we built enough rapport with him that he would let the trespassing thing slide. But really, who knows and who cares? He clearly sees us coming down the stairs that we're not supposed to be on, and then he sees us hop the minuscule fence that was supposed to stop us from getting in. And he has that look on his face like, come on guys, what are we doing? Why are you putting me in this position to have to scold you? So we run up to his desk and he tries to start scolding us, but we just steamrolled his attempt. We did not have time to talk about the little crow's nest and earthquake. And Hamza just goes, hold on dude, listen. And I just follow up with, hey, we know it's off limits, we're sorry. There's a woman walking into the geyser field right now. And Hamza adds to what I said and he goes, dude, it's the bride of the wedding. We think that the groom got cold feet and this woman is completely distraught. And the guide gives us like a really weird, confused look with a light giggle before he replies, guys, the bride and groom just walked in here about 2 minutes ago as in love as ever. And I just quickly reply, it was probably a bride from a different wedding. You guys got a couple going on this weekend probably. Who cares? There's a woman in the geyser field. And the guy just pulled out his radio really quickly and asked the patrolling rangers if they saw anybody walking in the geyser field. And there was a momentary pause before 3 separate patrolmen just reply something along the lines of, no sir, I don't see anybody, the field's empty. Hamza and I are completely dumbfounded because we know what we saw. So we were pleading with this guy like, dude, we know what we saw. There's a woman out there. Please listen to us. And we're asking him like, maybe the people on the radio are in different locations and they're not seeing what we saw. And the guy tries to calm us down by just telling us, guys, don't worry. They don't know, like all of these patrolmen are in this general area. They see this whole area and they would see if there was a woman in a wedding dress charging Old Faithful. Hamza and I are still in a tizzy because we're thinking this woman has already fallen into boiling water. So we start heading towards the door to see for ourselves. But before we get too far, the guide actually swings around the desk and gets in between us and the door. And he just has both of his palms facing us, directing us to slow down. And in almost a whisper, he just goes, guys, calm down. You're not the only people to see her. That's a common thing around here. No one's in danger, I promise you. And we're both so confused about what he just said. What do you mean we're not the first people to see her? He was just denying the fact that there was a woman in the geyser field. Now he's backtracking and saying that it's common for her to do this. What kind of mind games is this guy playing? And I replied with exactly what I just said to you. How can it be that you don't believe us that she's out there, but she's also seen commonly around here? And the guide replied in a way that told me that this wasn't his first time dancing around this question. And he firmly said, 2 things can be true at once. You guys saw a woman walking in the geyser field, and there is no woman walking in the geyser field. I was not appreciating how cryptic he was being, and I guess Hamza had enough of it. Hamza just goes, bro, straight answer or I'm going out there myself. And the guide clapped back fast because he knew that Hamza was not joking. Straight answer, you saw a spirit, a ghost, an apparition, whatever you want to call it. It's common here, we've all seen her. She's usually looking down from the crow's nest. Sometimes she's in stairwells. That's the straight answer. This guy was not lying. You could see it in the way that he delivered the information to us. Just chest high, confident, not embarrassed to break the news to us. He said it as if it was fact and as if he didn't care how we took it. He gave us the straight answer that we asked for. Even if it was a far out answer, you had to respect him for it. I was having a hard time processing the information, so Hamza broke the silence. Hamza just goes, you're telling me that the woman that we just spoke to upstairs is a ghost. Then before the guide even had a chance to answer, Hamza followed up with, so why would she ask us to come with her? The guy just shrugged his shoulders and exhaled as he said, I don't know guys, she does that sometimes. But nobody's ever been stupid enough to walk through the geyser field with her though. We just know that she always walks northeast of the Old Faithful, and then she just walks straight into the woods. Like I said, this is a common occurrence here. To be honest, none of the workers are even scared of her at this point. We all just kind of feel bad for her. And to be honest, that explanation calmed us down enough and kind of scared us enough to not want to follow her out there or go back up into the crow's nest. We were pretty much done with that. So I just kind of awkwardly, generously tipped the guide again. He really deserved that tip for talking us out of following that woman. Not to mention letting us off the hook for going into the crow's nest, so just slipped another 20. So we just told the guy that we would see him tomorrow for the tour and we just headed back to our room. But everything just felt super eerie after that. The charming wooden decor and the grand architecture of this place was just creepy now. And now the bathroomless rooms were a hassle because a late night bathroom break now meant walking down a creepy hallway, potentially filled with common ghosts. Hamza and I barely even talked about it. We actively talked about sports and music and just about anything not supernatural, just to put our minds at ease so we could actually get through this trip. Luckily, the mind-numbing conversation actually worked and we both dozed off at right about the same time. And like usual, nothing's actually scary in the morning. We were just back to being excited about Yellowstone and we had a pretty cool paranormal story to tell everybody when we got back home. So we just got ready and then headed to the lobby to meet our go-to guide that was ready to give us the tour. And basically, it was only about 10 of us and the guide. He was going to walk us around the area to all the best geysers and pools, right around the peak times where they're most likely to erupt. Some of the geysers could be very consistent, but other geysers could be very hard to predict. So he gave the group a disclaimer that it was highly unlikely that we were going to see anything spectacular. But luckily there was Old Faithful that's named that because of its very predictable eruptions. I don't know why I didn't put that together myself, but it was kind of funny to learn. I just imagine an early explorer trying to convince people back on the East Coast that there are massive eruptions of steam shooting out of the ground out west. And when he would try to show them, they would just all be looking at a hole that just stunk of rotten eggs for weeks, with the explorer just saying like, guys, any minute now, I swear it's gonna erupt. Then the explorer found one that just erupted consistently and he's like, this one right here, this is Old Faithful. And he's just got the eruption perfectly timed behind him. Anyway, we started the tour right around the time that the actual wedding began. So the 10 people that were here with us were actually the only people other than us that weren't a part of the wedding. Apparently the wedding was taking place about 2 miles away from the inn in just a beautiful scenic area. So the area nearby the inn was way more calm and quiet. So us 10 people that were on this tour had this whole area to ourselves for just about 2 hours. And to be honest, it felt so special and exclusive. And the only things that could have made it better was if we saw a major eruption and if the little boy from the family next to us would stop messing with us. The kid was probably like 8 to 10 years old. He was right around the age where young boys find out what being annoying is. And all they ever want to do is annoy the people around them for their own enjoyment. Do you know what I'm talking about? When a little boy just finds out that he could get under your skin just by trolling you, so they make it their entire personality for a few months. I remember when I went through it, I realized that people didn't like when you repeated what they said back to them over and over again. So I would do it to my sisters whenever they started messing with me. And it felt like a superpower irritating people because as a child, you don't have control over your surroundings or what you do. So when you learn that you could mess with somebody's emotions, it feels like a superpower. So I figured I might as well try it on my dad. Turns out not a superpower. And I learned that day that dad's strength is the real superpower. And being a nuisance to everyone around you is in fact not funny. The life lesson that day was consequences. And I really wish I could have taught that young boy the same lesson that day because somebody needed to. The lack of control and discipline that family had over him was appalling. The kid just wouldn't stop staring at us, and every chance he got, he would just walk over and poke us in the back, or just come over and tug on our jacket before running away. I'm not an easy guy to annoy. Most things don't get under my skin, honestly. But after the literal 20th time this kid came over to us, I looked over at the parents like, are you gonna scold this kid or am I gonna have to do it? I chose to not make a scene or embarrass the parents because they already had 2 other screaming infants with them that looked like twins, and I didn't want to pile on. Hamza did not make the same decision. He was sick of this kid. And Hamza is the nicest guy in the world, but when somebody is not doing the right thing or being completely inconsiderate publicly, he is the person to step up and say the uncomfortable thing that everyone else is thinking. And to be fair, his breaking point was letting the kid come up to him. The kid jumped up, grabbed his lapel of his jacket, and let gravity pull him down and yanked Hamza's neck. It obviously didn't hurt because it's a kid and Hamza's a grown man, but it's a really annoying thing to do to a stranger. So Hamza calls over to the parents like, yo, can you get your annoying ass kid out of here? He was clearly trying to teach the boy a social lesson as well. Hopefully he would embarrass him a little bit with everybody looking at him and saying like, you're an annoying ass kid, and break this very annoying behavior pattern. These 2 parents were so all over the place. They were clearly embarrassed, but they just had so much else going on. 2 more babies, bags thrown over both shoulders, pushing a stroller. Just their life looked like a hot mess. Clearly they were incapable of correcting this kid's behavior. So Hamza just looks down at the kid very bluntly and just goes, kid, leave us alone. I didn't think this was gonna work. This kid looked resilient in his annoyance, but this kid just looked back at us, and I didn't expect him to reply the way that he did. He looks Hamza right in the eyes and says, if you won't follow her, I'll make you follow me. And Hamza and I look at each other just completely perplexed at what this kid just said. Why would he say that, and why is it so on the nose with the context of what happened the night before to us? This kid went from annoying to creepy very quickly, and before we had the chance to respond to him, maybe get a little bit more information out of him, he just runs back over to his parents. And there was a real tension in the air in the whole group from that altercation. Even though most of the group was ignoring what was going on, and I didn't know what was going to be said next, it didn't seem like the altercation was quite over, but we didn't actually get to find out because a geyser directly to our right cut the tension like a sword through butter. We were right next to the Grand Geyser, which is a geyser that doesn't erupt consistently. It's sporadic and rare, so everybody's attention just goes towards it, including ours. And this geyser was seriously impressive. This thing must have shot 200 feet into the air, and it just kept going on and on for like 10 minutes. And we took that opportunity to separate ourselves from that family. We didn't stay in the same general area as them. We just went up to our guide friend closer to the head of the group, and we just enjoyed the geyser near our guide friend. To be honest, it almost felt like we had to stand by the teacher so we didn't get bullied by the kid. But we didn't really care anymore though, because this geyser was plenty enough for us. It scratched our itch, and once it went down, we'd probably just head back to the inn so we didn't have to endure that insufferable family anymore. And we just let the guide know that we were planning to head back early after this one, and he didn't really mind at all. So the 10-minute eruption abruptly came to an end, and some people even clapped. I thought that was really wholesome and cute that a geyser went off and everybody just applauded Mother Nature. But right as the applause kind of started settling down, we started hearing like scared calling out for, it seemed like help at first, but then we realized somebody was calling somebody's name. They were calling out for Jason. So we look back to the back end of the group where we were before, and we see that mother calling out for Jason repeatedly. And Jason must have been the kid that was annoying us. At least we thought that because we didn't see the kid around her anymore. And initially I was even more annoyed because this lady's making a huge scene calling for this kid. And she's just freaking out when this kid couldn't have even been gone for more than 10 minutes. But as we all started kind of looking around for him, thinking that he's probably hiding behind a trash can or under a bench, he's nowhere, and we actually start getting really concerned. It's really weird how a kid could go from being annoying to creepy to just a child in need. Because nothing about a child's personality gets in the way of the overarching feeling to keep them safe. It really doesn't matter how annoying they are. They're just kids, and as an adult, you're just like, we just gotta make sure the kids are good. It just feels like a primal instinct to keep our young safe. And little Jason was nowhere to be found, and everybody in this group's attention was on the Grand Geyser for the last 10 minutes. So he could have gotten a pretty good head start on us, but that's if he ran off the moment that it started. And apparently the parents didn't seem to notice when he drifted off from the group. They were just panicking and yelling, which is absolutely understandable because we're surrounded by geysers and pools of boiling hot acid water. If he jumped off the boardwalk, he very easily could have fallen into something. So once he didn't pop out and reveal himself after the first 2 minutes, everybody in the group went into parent mode. All 10 of us spread out in different directions starting to search for him. And me, the guide, and Hamza started heading back in the direction back towards the inn. We didn't go that direction for any particular reason, anything other than the fact that the other people just started going in the other direction So we're like, all right, we'll go in this direction. Everyone was calling for him in the distance, but eventually we were so spread out that we could just faintly hear people calling him in the distance. And Hamza, clearly with a little bit of a guilty conscience, he breaks the silence of our group by asking us, guys, do you think he ran because of what I said? We both saw that he had some guilt in his eyes, so we just reassured him like, yo, that kid was gonna do whatever he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. I don't think it had anything to do with you. We just need to focus on finding him. Don't worry about anything else. So I thought it would be a good time to fill the guide in on what this little kid said to us before he ran off. It just felt like it was too on the nose and he should probably know about this. So I start off by saying like, listen dude, this is gonna sound odd, but that kid said something that reminded us of what you told us last night. And the guide looked at me a little bit confused and he goes, bro, are you talking about what you saw last night? And I'm like, yeah dude, this kid just came up to us and he goes, if you won't follow her, I'll make you follow me. And the guide's eyes light up with fear as if this wasn't the first time he heard something like that either. And he didn't seem surprised, he just seemed scared. But before he got the chance to rebuttal to me, I hear Hamza shout, yo, is that him? And I just see him pointing northeast into the tree line away from the geyser field. We had walked right up to a split in the boardwalk near the Belgian pool. And this area of the geyser field was really close to a tree line, but it wasn't your normal kind of tree line. This tree line is almost completely white and decayed. The trees in that area get hit with so much steam and minerals from the geysers nearby that they become almost completely white. They lose all their leaves and they fall down in stacks. And little Jason is peeking out from behind one of those white stacks. It's him for sure. And once he sees that we see him, he stands up and takes off running into the woods. So before we take off running, we look around to see if there's anybody else in our general vicinity to come help us catch him, but there's nobody around. So we look to the guide to give us the go-ahead to chase after him. I wasn't about to just bolt because we would have to go off the boardwalk and there was about 30 feet between the boardwalk and the tree line. I didn't know if the ground between us and the kid was safe to run across. And the guide seemed to know what I was kind of implying with my eyes, and he just goes, we should be good to cross here. Let's just stay on the more green patches. And then once we're in the trees, we're definitely good. So we hop off the boardwalk and we tippy-toe run on the most green patches through this portion of the geyser field until we get into the tree line. And every step in that 30-foot stretch felt like the one that was just gonna, my foot was gonna go through the dirt and I was gonna plunge into boiling water. But eventually we cleared that small danger zone and we entered the tree line. And once we got into the trees, we saw little Jason about 50 feet deeper into the woods just standing there waiting for us. Was this kid really trolling us right now? Is he playing You Can't Catch Me, but in plain sight waiting for us to start chasing him? And all of us look at each other and roll our eyes like, this friggin' kid. This kid really ran off in the middle of Yellowstone National Park to further annoy the adults around him. He's using our inclination to keep him safe to entertain himself. He doesn't even really know how much danger he's in. He is too young and stupid to even have a remote understanding of how unforgiving nature can be. And unfortunately, we're the only adults around right now to protect him from his own ignorance. Initially, I thought it was going to be easy to catch him. I was definitely faster than the kid and I could probably chase him down on a straightaway, but from the moment we stepped into the forest, the ground was at a steep incline. So this kid had no problem keeping about 30 to 50 feet in between us. And every time we would make a strong push to close the distance, he would speed up just to keep that distance the same. But when we would slow down, he would slow down. And when we would stop, he would stop and just wait there smiling. And this went on for almost 10 minutes before we entered a clearing. There were far fewer trees in this area, and it was actually the first time I looked around to see how deep we actually went into the forest. And I'm not seeing any signs of the inn or surrounding tourist attractions. Like, we're deep in the woods at this point. I didn't like that feeling at all. In my head, we need to get this kid as fast as we could before we lost our bearings. And once we were in the clearing, we just started walking and started calling over to Jason. We were basically just begging this kid to come back with us and stop running. We were walking slowly towards him and he was backpedaling slowly, looking back towards us. And he looked very amused until he wasn't. The smile on his face abruptly disappeared and he covered his ears with his hands. And then he squatted all the way down and covered his entire head with his arms. And we all looked around to see what he was hiding from, but there was nothing in sight. So he must have just been toying with us again. And just as I was about to take off sprinting towards him while he's not prepared to run, we all got hit with a menacing odor. A gust of wind came barreling in, and with it came the most intense smell I've ever smelled. It smelled like inhaling those smelling salts that powerlifters use before deadlifting 1,000 pounds. It was so pungent and sharp that you actually got scared to inhale a second time. The smell wasn't the only bad part. This breeze physically hurt in every way. If you breathed in through your nose, it burnt your nose hairs off. If you're a mouth breather, it felt like a severe sore throat. And if you looked into the direction of the wind, your eyes would start pouring tears to protect themselves. But after the smell came the sound, and I realized in that moment that this wasn't the first time we experienced this. We caught a small breeze of whatever this was last night while we were in the crow's crow's nest. But this was levels above last night. Last night there was a faint symphony, but today it was blaring. It was like there was an orchestra directly above us. The intense sound tickled my eardrums like it was like daggers, and it induced tinnitus almost immediately. My ears were just ringing. They were ringing and tingling while this music was assaulting them. And I tried to cover my ears with my hands, but it wasn't helping whatsoever. And the guide seemed to take the brunt of the breeze to his face, and he was keeled over, just rubbing his eyes vigorously. And Hamza's looking at me confused. He didn't look like he was in pain like myself and the guide. I just saw him rubbing the front of his teeth with his tongue inside of his mouth. It was as if he was looking for food stuck in his teeth. But then the violent breeze started to fade slightly, and I started to feel a little bit of relief in my ears. The pain wasn't completely disappearing. It felt more like knocking water loose that was stuck in your ears for hours. My ears just popped, and I felt a slight moist soothing sensation. It was a complete relief because I didn't know how much longer I could take that pain. And at that same time, I watched Hamza put his hand over his mouth as if he realized something. But instead of starting to talk, he reached 2 fingers inside of his lips and pulled something out. And he looked at me in total shock as he held up one of his canine teeth to me. It was the root and all. His tooth fell out of his head, and whatever was giving me relief inside of my ears, I now felt pouring out of the side of my head. So I touch my ear and I feel like a thick liquid that I'm expecting to be some type of like oozing earwax. It wasn't. It was blood, and it was pouring from both of my ears. So then we turn our attention toward the guide, whose eyes are so bloodshot and swollen. It looks like he needs an EpiPen for an allergic reaction. And at that moment, Hamza breaks the terror-induced silence by saying, "Guys, I think I taste pennies." I didn't really know what he meant. I just thought it was because he lost his tooth and he had blood in his mouth, so he's tasting metal. I just kind of overlook and I just reply to the group, "Guys, we need to get out of this clearing." So without hesitation, we just start sprinting towards Jason, who's again standing up now, looking completely unscathed. And like clockwork, this kid just turns around and starts sprinting away from us. It felt weird running away from wind because you can't see it. You don't know if you're running into it. You might be running into more of it for all you know. But luckily we were running away from it because once we entered the foliage on the other side, everything seemed to stop. The music, the smell, the pain, everything. Everything other than Jason. Little old Jason didn't stop running. He was still 30 feet ahead of us, deeper into the dense woods. I seriously contemplated leaving him out there at that moment. Whatever was in that wind back there felt unnatural and felt like it could be fatal if we stayed in it. And I know the other guys considered it too by the looks on their faces. And I think the only reason we didn't was because the incline in the ground stopped here. The ground was completely flat moving forward, and Jason was only about 40 feet ahead of us now. And again, he's just standing there waiting for us to move. I liked my chances of catching him in this terrain, so I quickly tell the guys to just trail me from behind and shout to me if I get too far ahead. I wasn't willing to get separated from them just to chase this kid down, but I was going to give it one more shot. I was just ready to put my head down and take off like those 40-yard dash days and just track this kid down. So I get to full speed in 10 hard steps, and I just pick my posture up, high knees to maintain top speed with my eyes locked in on this kid's back. I'm just hauling ass after this kid. And within 20 seconds, I know for sure that I'm going to catch him. I just hope that he doesn't try to wiggle away when I get up to him. My eyes are just still locked in on him. I'm pumping my arms, but then I notice something as I'm closing in on him off to the right. I see a cabin off to our right, and I see through the window what looked to be like some feminine shoulders maybe cleaning in there. And once I noticed it, this kid turns his running course straight towards this cabin. And I was about 10 feet away from him when he got up to that door. I wanted so desperately to catch him before he got in there, but he was able to slip in the door and close it behind him. So I peer through the window expecting to see an altercation taking place inside. But it was just the kid in there, so I must have seen just some type of sun glare off the window. The place was empty other than him, and there was no back door for him to escape. I just cornered the kid, stayed by the front door because I didn't feel like wrestling him back to the inn. So I just waited for the other guys to catch up. I was also so out of breath from that sprint that this kid probably could have fought me off. Not really, I would have manhandled that little 40-pound prick, but I just wanted help. I just didn't feel like doing that myself. So the guys finally catch up to me, and they look horrible still. So I look down at my shirt and I realize that both of my sleeves are covered in my ear blood. So I must look as bad as them. So who am I to judge the way that they're looking? And I just tell him that he's stuck in there, and we all agree that we're all just gonna go in at the same time. So this kid has zero chance of getting away. So we open the door, and this kid's on the floor completely out cold. Initially, I thought he was doing that to fake us out, but upon inspection, the kid seemed to be completely unconscious. We gave him a couple pretty hard pinches that there's no way he could have faked sleeping through. And I know that sounds bad, but it's better than slapping him to see if he wakes up. Just a little pinch on the tender backside of his tricep. He was completely out cold, but he was breathing and he had a pulse, so he must have been okay. And the plan was to just grab him and walk back right away. But once we were in this cabin, we just couldn't leave. This cabin looked like it hadn't been lived in for decades, if not a century, just based on the dust and decor. Somebody definitely lived here at one time though, and it was somebody who was battling serious demons. There's no pictures or paintings on the wall. The walls were just unfinished wood covered in writings by what seemed like a madman, and all the words were just written in white paint, and the words were just covering every inch of every wall, and everything was just desperate apologies laced with painful regret. Whoever had been living here was dealing with extreme guilt, and they were punishing themselves every day for whatever they did. It seemed as if they wanted to be surrounded by their regrets, and that they wanted to remind themselves every day how horrible of a person they were. It was horrible in there. This place was a sad reality check that some poor souls live a horrible existence, just filled with shame and self-hate. There wasn't much else inside of this cabin outside of a dusty bed and a makeshift nightstand. And on the nightstand, we found something that kind of looked to be a journal. And right when I opened it, I knew it was the same man's journal, whoever wrote all this on the walls. It seemed to just be an extension of what was already written on the walls. And most of it was the chicken scratch of a madman. But there was one legible entry in this thing. The page was eerily faded by time, but it was legible enough to see what he was saying. The man spoke and wrote very differently than we speak today, so I'm just going to put it into modern terms for you. And it basically stated that this man was mourning his late wife. In fact, he was mourning his murdered wife. And he made it very clear in this journal entry that he was not the man that killed his wife. When he had gotten back to their hotel room, she had already been murdered and mutilated. And apparently he felt like he had no other option but to flee the scene, because everybody else at the hotel would suspect that he was guilty. Then he went on to explain why everybody would assume that he's guilty. Apparently he was far older than his wife. They were staying at the Old Faithful Inn that we were staying at for their honeymoon. And the woman's father didn't want her to marry this man because her father was extremely wealthy, and came to the conclusion that this man was manipulating his daughter in an attempt to secure her family's money. And when the daughter went on with this marriage, went through with it, the father just gave her a lump sum of money. It was a good amount, but nothing that would set her up for life. And the newlywed couple apparently spent it all in the first week of their honeymoon. And the daughter panicked because it was her first time being broke, and she knew she was cut off from her family's fortune. And the new husband asked his new wife to ask her father for just a little bit more money. And the wife freaked out. I want to make this clear. The man that was writing this journal entry was defending himself in this journal entry. He was making it seem like it was completely okay to ask his new wife to beg her father for money. And apparently the daughter snapped on her new husband in the lobby of the Old Faithful Inn, and they had a public argument because they were both very intoxicated. Many witnesses saw and heard what they were fighting about. And the man that wrote this journal stated that he gave his wife some alone time before going to check on her a little bit later in their room. But when he got there, he found her murdered. And then the journal entry started blaming multiple other men that he bumped into and met at the inn that weekend, trying to desperately point blame at anybody but himself. He went on to write about how they would always fight, but he was always able to sweet talk the daughter back to him, and he would just get her to love him again and stay with him. He was literally bragging about his ability to manipulate this girl in this journal entry. We were all reading through it together. It was in tough English to understand, but the guide was the first one to speak up, and his eyes are still swollen and almost closed, but he managed to say, "Guys, I left some things out about the woman that you saw in the crow's nest. She has been said to have been murdered by her husband in the hotel. Apparently he killed her in her sleep. He left her body in her room and he hid her head in the crow's nest. They never found the husband, so they figured he did it. And I think this is his journal. And I think this is where she was trying to take you. She's trying to clear her husband's name because he didn't do it." I was astonished that he had left that part out of the story until now, but I was more astonished that he didn't see what was actually going on here. The man who wrote this journal manipulated a young woman, groomed and manipulated a young woman into marrying him for her father's fortune. And the father smelt the weasel and barred them from his funds. And this man spent all they had and then threw a tantrum because she wouldn't ask for more. And then he killed her for it. But the saddest part is that this weasel of a man had her so emotionally manipulated that even in death, she's trying to clear his name. Her soul is attached to these grounds, desperately trying to bring people to this cabin, where he is still denying committing this heinous act on his new wife. She didn't see him do it, so she doesn't think it was him. Poor girl. What a horrible man. I hope his soul gets caught in the wind. So there it is for you, the story of the Old Faithful Inn in Yellowstone National Park. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you choose to like and subscribe. I hope you stay for another one. I'm excited to see you next time, and we're out. And if you want another story just like the one that you just watched, that's just as fun and as exciting, YouTube thinks you would like this one.